front of the Israeli School, Universal Practical Knowledge, the Philadelphia Division, here at 3226 Cheltenham Avenue in Philadelphia. We're standing in front of the school right now, getting a description of the 12 tribe sign that's been painted by one of the brothers that was in the school: Judah, Benjamin, Levi, Simeon, Zebulun, Ephraim, Manasseh, Gad, Reuben, Naphtali, Asher, and Issachar. Those are the 12 tribes of Israel.
Shalom. Shalom. You've been waiting for this day, so this day has finally come. A lot of you have been wondering where this knowledge that you've been hearing is coming from, and the powerful truth that you've been hearing, how this was established. Well, we finally were able to arrange for the priests to come down from New York and spend some time with us. And I'd like to introduce them if I can. These are some great brothers. We're very glad to have them with us. We want to make them feel as warm as possible, because this is their work and the extension of their work and what they've laid down some time ago. I'd like to introduce, first of all, priest and six-shield general, fourth in command in the nation of Israel, Lahab. I'd like to salute this brother. Macho! Barak! Yeshabim, which means sit. And I'm going to turn it over now to priest General Lahab.
Water, brother. I'd like to say this, starting off, we're very impressed at your school here, and we're very impressed to see that the brothers and sisters in Philadelphia think enough of the Most High and the Bible and the truth and your nationality to be a part of this, because most of the brothers and sisters are running from the truth.
Hey, Shalom Israel. Yahba Shem Shabrak Thumb to the brothers. Yahweh Shemal Thumb by Shem Shah to the sisters. I'm Priest Officer Shari Wan and the Commanding General Yana. All right, there's another Monday night history class. Salaki, I apologize for the time, for anybody, who's regularly tuned in with us. We had some technical difficulties. So it's 8 o'clock now. We're going to get a short class up today. All right, Salaki again. We're going to speak on a little bit about Memorial Day. Okay, today that, it passed last week. A few days ago. For brothers and sisters who have been watching, brothers and sisters tuned in with the UPK. We broke down a million times, about the Lord hating our feast days. You know what I mean? The book of Ecclesiasticus speaking on, why does one day excel another? You know what I mean? And it says by the knowledge of the Most High that he established, feast days and seasons and, high holy days and days that were important to blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous. You know what I mean? So in the ISUPK, we already know, and we're raised by Commanding General Yana not to celebrate these feast days. You know what I mean? Not to celebrate days that the world would deem, an important day. All right. And we do that for a reason. Right? It says in the New Testament that the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God. What does that mean? It means that the Most High knows better. We've seen time and time again, people in this earth, decide what's important or decide what is good knowledge or good wisdom or, what a day that is important that we should celebrate. And really the Most High's wisdom is far beyond, anything that we could imagine. And so we're going to get into that a little bit today. Again, Salaki for the time. Shout out to the chat. What's going on to Wanda Williams? All right. Shout out to Abawan's Rib. Y'all Shmar Thumba Shimon Shah. Yeah, so I get the noise down. Yeah, just close my door, princess. Cool water. All right. So let's jump right into it. Okay, I got a quick article we're gonna scan through. Let me see. It's a quick article we're gonna scan through to start the class off. Again, something to add, that I can't stress enough that this class, this Monday Night History class is a class that, is presented to Blacks, Hispanics, Indigenous from our perspective. You know what I mean? It is very important not to, view history from the lens of a white man, because he'll have you believe he's, some beautiful hero. And he'll speak on, all the quote unquote amazing events that white people have accomplished. You know what I mean? But in this history class, we speak on it from our perspective. It's extremely valuable for our people. So let me zoom in a bit. All right, make this a little bigger. So this is just a quick article just to kick the class off. It's titled "The First Memorial Day." Okay. Titled "The First Memorial Day," and it says, "Memorial Day is the day our nation pauses to honor the service and sacrifice of our military heroes who gave their lives to secure our freedoms." I'll pause there for a second because, something I was speaking on earlier when he said the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God. Absolute foolish. This statement right here, is absolute nonsense. Because Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous, we are not free. You know what I mean? They're all up in arms today, speaking on how they're going backwards in time because they're taking, Donald Trump is taking away the rights of Black people to vote. You know what I mean? Something that Black people say, is one of the amazing rights that we have being free in this country. And now Donald Trump is sitting there taking away, reversing those rights, reversing the things that our ancestors fought for in this country, just to have a little peace in this place. It says that, these military heroes gave their lives to secure our freedoms. You're Black, Hispanic, or Indigenous, you already know that your condition in America has been absolute hell. You know what I mean? There's a scenario that I like to use about the idea of Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous being free. And there was this TV show I was watching. It's like one of those prison shows, prison documentary shows. And what the warden of one of these prisons, decided to do was he was going to open the gates of the jail cells and let the prisoners roam free within the prison. And he told the prisoners, so long as y'all act right, you don't fight, you don't, you know what I mean, you stick to certain schedules, I will leave the gates open. And these prisoners, they damn near thought they were in heaven. You know what I mean? Fighting tooth and nail not to be on 24-hour lockdown, to be able to roam free inside the prison, which is exactly the life Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous live inside of America. Like freedom is not this idea where you just open the gates and you allow the prisoners, you allow the slaves to roam around the country free. That is not freedom. Let me see. I think there's a definition. Because there's a specific definition of freedom that says, sending the person back to where they came from. Let me see. I don't see that in here. I remember reading it somewhere. But you look at, a perfect example is the Jewish people, what they went through in the Holocaust. Their freedom was going back to, or finding or having their own country. Not learning to live amongst the Germans, not fighting the Germans to, be first-class citizens, or fighting the Germans to be recognized, as an equal citizen inside of their country. The Jewish man understood that he had to leave and go into his own country to have freedom. Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous, we don't understand that concept inside of North and South Central America. We have this false sense of freedom. We believe that, getting some rights inside of a country underneath the people that enslaved us is freedom. And it's very sad, and it shows the destruction and the mindset of our people today. Freedom is going back to the place that you came from. Going back home. You know what I mean? Like real freedom to a prisoner inside of a jail is the day he walks off of the property of that prison, gets in a car or a taxi, and goes home. That's freedom, not staying in the place where you were oppressed. All right. Quick shout out to the chat. Carolyn Radsville, Maria, always tuning in. Thawada Sisters, Yahweh Shemar Thamba Shimei Shah. All right. Get those likes up if you can. Like, share, subscribe. Which is why it said, the Most High said, the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God. Because we listen to the wisdom of the world, we truly believe we're free. It says Memorial Day is the day our nation pauses to honor the service and sacrifice of our military heroes who gave their lives to secure our freedoms. Another thing, you go back in history, you see where, there's a good scripture on that in Psalms as well. But you go back in history and you see where, Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous, we joined our oppressors' military to fight for freedom or fight for certain rights here. And after returning back from the military and the war that we signed up for, how many of us were denied the freedom that was promised to us? You had a lot of slaves in America who, they went to war, were promised freedom, got on a boat, went up to Canada in Nova Scotia, and they walked right back into slavery. They walked right back into oppression. You think Canada was a safe haven for blacks, you are heavily misunderstood. Matter of fact, you look up history, you see that, you know, freedom for a slave was getting as far away from their plantation as possible. You know what I mean? They would go from Florida all the way to the north in Detroit, where, you know, their slave owners could not recognize them, or they could be in a community where nobody would recognize, you know, whose property they belonged to. Well, guess what? That was the same for the North. Slaves in Canada weren't running, you know what I mean, from Toronto to, you know, from Toronto to Halifax. They're going from Toronto all the way down to Florida because they're trying to get as far away from their plantation as possible, to a place where nobody could recognize them and they wouldn't be in that hard bondage that we were in, you know, a couple hundred years ago. We sat up here fighting for our oppressor, and a lot of us many times ended up in the same condition that we were in, because whites inside of Canada hated you just as much as whites in Alabama. It was no difference. It says, one of the earliest commemorations of what would later become Memorial Day was organized on May 1st, 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina, at a former Confederate prison camp known as the Martyrs of the Racecourse Cemetery. The memorial service was established by over 1,000 newly freed African Americans, in addition to U.S. colored troops and a small group of white Charlestonians. So you have this first memorial service being celebrated. And this first memorial service being celebrated in America was established by 1,000 so-called newly freed African Americans, which is a very, you know, interesting concept to say. I'm going to bring this verse up in Baruch. Let's see if I can find it really quick. In Baruch chapter 3 and verse 4. Baruch chapter 3 and verse 4 says, O Lord Almighty, thou God of Israel, hear now the prayers of the dead Israelites. You're Black, Hispanic, or Indigenous. You are an Israelite according to the Bible. That's your nationality. You want to think of, you know, what freedom really looked like, what freedom really looks like for Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous. It's going back to the land of your forefathers. That's what true freedom looks like. And your ancestors sitting here, you know, during this time, having a memorial service for the quote-unquote newly freed African Americans. What do you think your ancestors were thinking of what freedom looked like? You see what I'm saying? What do you think that they would have wanted for Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous? Baruch says, remember the prayers of the dead Israelites. Think of all the African Americans, all the Blacks that went to war and lost their life fighting for their oppressor. What do you think they would be praying for today? These brothers right here, these newly freed African Americans, what they did was celebrate a day to commemorate what their, these brothers fought for. And you got to ask yourself, are we living in a condition today that the people who fought and lost their lives wanted us to be in? There's so many sad stories that, we speak on, every day. So many stories. Black Watch is going to be live in, another 40 minutes. And they're going to bring out stories after stories of the abuse of what Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous are going through. How many times have I watched the video of what those police officers did to Tamir Rice? It's a very sad thing. And I wonder if these brothers that went to war would be happy with the condition of where we're at today. Or would they have wanted something better? Would they have wanted something more? This was the first Memorial Day celebration in America. It says, this group came together to honor the 257 Union soldiers who died as a result of the poor conditions of the Confederate prison camp during the war. They exhumed the soldiers from a mass grave that the Confederates made and created proper burial grounds for the Union soldiers. Together they sang hymns, placed flowers, and gave readings in honor of the soldiers' sacrifice. Okay, so this was the first Memorial Day celebrated in America. It was celebrated by Blacks. And I would be curious to know if they're happy with our condition today. I'd be curious to know if their sacrifice was something that was worth it. Let me pull up this video on Tamir Rice. A quick shout out to the chat. What's going on, Mashar? What's going on, Adawan Yabashim Shabakata? The water for tuning in. These police officers right here pull up to a park where a 12-year-old child is playing. 12-year-old black child is playing. They straight up do a drive-by assassination on this 12-year-old child. And let me see what year this took place. This happened in 2014. You know what I mean? This is nothing but 10 years ago. And I always have this envision in my head as I think about all the thousands or hundreds of thousands of, you know, Black, Hispanic, and indigenous soldiers that fought for freedom inside of America. They went to war so that Blacks could have a better life in this country. And if you're telling me that, or if you told brothers, you know, back then that police officers would still hunt Blacks in the streets, even after you go to war and fight for us, no way in hell am I joining that army. No way in hell am I signing up to fight for the American flag. No way am I signing up to fight for whatever war Donald Trump is sending me off to, because I know my people are going to continually be oppressed. Like, I sit here, you know, one of the saddest things, and there's so many sad things going on in this earth, but just to give an example of things going on today, you have Hispanic brothers signing up and joining the police force, the military, you know, the FBI, and these different organizations, these places that go to war and fight for Donald Trump, fight for America. Meanwhile, your people are being deported and abused by that same goddamn government. It doesn't make any sense. Imagine being a Hispanic brother working for ICE itself, going around, you know, ripping 6-year-old babies out of mothers' arms to send them back in a hole in Mexico somewhere. That's what we do when we join Esau's military. We fight for his cause. We don't fight for our own. And that's why Baruch 3 and 4 is such a heavy verse, because it says, O Lord Almighty, thou God of Israel, hear now the prayers of the dead Israelites. You got to almost put your mind in that mindset of, if my ancestors fell or died in battle, I wonder what their prayer would be. I wonder if a black man on his deathbed would be looking back saying, you know, this war that I joined was worth it. I wonder if, looking back in time, we could say, was joining these wars worth it? And if you're Black, Hispanic, or Indigenous today, and you think that the condition of our people is in a good place, Baba Kasha, please move out the way. Because what happened to brothers like Tamir Rice, this is not our heaven. This is not our safety. Let me read a little bit on the Britannica website of Memorial Day. It says, in the United States, holiday last Monday in May, honoring those who have died while serving in the country's armed forces. It originated during the American Civil War, when citizens placed flowers on the graves of those who had been killed in battle. The first national observance was in 1868 after World War I. The name was changed to Memorial Day. Now, this is what's a word? I shouldn't say beautiful thing. But what we have the advantage of, as brothers and sisters sitting here today, is to be able to look back in history and say, or ask ourselves, did we get it right or did we get it wrong? I can confidently sit here today, look back in history and say, Christianity, they got it wrong. Muslims, they got it wrong. Because I can look at all the death and all the suffering, all the pain of being under the leadership of that Christian banner. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, Christianity got it wrong. We have the advantage today of looking back in history and saying, did we get it right when we joined these different wars? This said, you read that last sentence, it said, the first national observance was in 1868 after World War I. Let me zoom in a little bit. Now, I'm curious to know if Blacks, Hispanics, or Indigenous can look back on World War I and say, was it worth joining that war as a people? You know what I mean? Like, think of, let's take this for example. Take World War II. And during World War II, America dropped a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Think of how many of our people joined and fought in that war. And I'm curious today to say, were all those people, over in Japan that were bombed by the U.S. government or by the U.S. nation, was that something that was worth fighting for? Think of a present day wars, or wars that happened just a decade ago over in Iraq, and that whole war on terrorism. Think of all the lives that were lost during that war. especially under, your beloved Barack Obama administration. Was that war worth it? Did that war do something to better my people? You have the advantage today to look back in the records and, come to a more level-headed conclusion. All the wars that we've fought for, was it worth it? Did we achieve something worthy by it? And keep reading. It says, the first national observance, Slovakia, was in 1868 after World War I. The name was changed to Memorial Day. And in 1971, it became a federal holiday. The day is observed by visits to cemeteries, where flags and other items are placed on the graves of veterans. There are also parades and ceremonies. In addition, Memorial Day is considered the start of summer in the United States. Okay, I'm going to drop that. Just giving a, quick breakdown on definition of Memorial Day. Let me see if I can pull this video up on George Floyd. Salaki, I had it pulled up. Where'd it go? All right, quick shout out to the chat. Everybody tuned in. We got Aisha Banath, Janice Bell, Nada Bar. All right, the water for tuning in. I'll pull up a video. I had it up on YouTube. Slovakia. This is let me just play this clip really quick. This is a brother on Memorial Day saying, hope is not lost. Like, I've been having technical difficulties all night long. Okay, I can't get it to play for some reason, but let me break it down really quick. So this brother, and it's interesting to see because he's sitting here on Memorial Day and it's so diabolical. It's something that you damn near gotta laugh at, the mentality of our people, because he's sitting here, on a podium on Memorial Day, expressing to Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous that hope is not lost. And this is in response to George Floyd being, assassinated by that devil, Derek Chauvin. You had blacks raising up saying, we're not going to celebrate Memorial Day because the condition of our people, look at what's happening to George Floyd. And this brother, some people might call him a Uncle Tom, gets up on a podium and tells blacks hope is not lost in this country. This is 2026. And black people today are sitting here still saying there is hope for us in North and South Central America. I mean, how many years are you going to hope or put your faith in this place of being better for your people? I look at the condition of my people today and I say, damn, we just unalived, aborted 800,000 babies like it was nothing in 2025. 800,000 Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous babies murdered inside the womb of a woman. Before we even, past the age of 1, I'm thinking of how many of our lives are lost as a people. I think of all the propaganda placed on Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous. The light we're viewed in from these other nations. I look at how the household is destroyed. Let me see how many Black people are incarcerated in 2026. It says, let's see if I can get a number. Ask Google AI really quick. Incarcerated. You have, give me a number. It says, they're giving me percentages. Here we go. State prisons and local jails. While federal data updates weekly, total state and local tracking takes longer to aggregate. Across all combined state prisons, federal facilities, and local jails, the Sentencing Project reports that nearly 2 million people are incarcerated in the United States. 38%, damn near 40% of those 2 million people are Black. That is not including Hispanic or Indigenous. So what, 500,000, 50% is 1 million. Go a little under that, say what, 800,000, 850,000 is 38%. This year alone, my people are sitting inside of a prison cell. Let me look up, I'll show you one more thing inside of Canada, which the oppression, all over this place is insanity. Let me share my screen. This is a quick AI overview. It says Indigenous women represent approximately half of all federally incarcerated women in Canada, accounting for up to 50% of the female federal prison population, despite making up less than 5% of the total female population. This is, we gonna say in 2026 we're free? This stat always, bewilders me. I'm always in awe every time I see this. You telling me that Indigenous women in Canada only make up 5% of the total population? 5% of the total population in Canada. And they account for half of the entire female prison population inside Canada. This is freedom? This stat isn't including Hispanic and Black women. That 38% of Blacks incarcerated in the States, that's not including Hispanic and Indigenous. We damn near make up the entire prison population between Canada and America alone. And that's freedom? This is what we fought for? You got women in America today complaining about, finding a good Black man, and they're saying that we can't find one because they're all in prison. It's not enough men to go around. This is what we fought for? To be destroyed as a people in 2026? It's insanity. At some point, we have to wake up as a people and say, you know what? I no longer hope in America. I no longer hope in Canada. I no longer hope in Christianity. I no longer hope in all these different systems that are in front of me, because all of it has failed us. It's crazy to me to think that the common upbringing of a Black, Hispanic, or Indigenous child is being raised in a fatherless home. That's every Black man's experience, being raised without a father. This is what we fought for. This is the American dream. This is what our ancestors died for in the wars and the military. It's insanity. Let me bring up one more quick story. There was something called, I think it was called hidden churches. Invisible churches. Let me share my screen on this really quick. This is the last article I'll touch on for the class today. There was something called invisible churches. Okay? Invisible churches, Let me read this. It says invisible churches among enslaved African Americans in the United States were informal Christian groups where enslaved people listened to preachers that they chose without their slaveholders' knowledge. Because during slavery, you were not allowed to read the Bible. There's stories of women's eyes being burned out of their eye sockets for reading the Bible. So what did we set up during slavery? We had something called invisible churches, where we didn't have to listen to our slave owners read the Bible to us. We could go off and read it ourselves. And this was a heavy, heavy crime during this time. It says the invisible churches taught a different message from white-controlled churches and did not emphasize obedience to slave masters. Some slaves could not contact invisible churches, and others did not agree with an invisible church's message, but many slaves were comforted by the invisible churches. The invisible churches were a branch of Christian churches in the slave community. So now, you're telling me that in 2026, one of the freedoms we gained in America was something as simple as the freedom of religion. Is that what you're telling me? Especially if you're a brother or sister in the ISUPK, you understand that you can be anything except an Israelite. How much millions of dollars did they fine Kyrie Irving for sharing a book saying he was an Israelite? Your ancestors fought and died in wars so that you could read the Bible. But think of all the laws they're passing today to remove the ability to even read out of this book. It is happening. They just passed this law, I think, last year inside of Canada. General Yohana had to fight tooth and nail and won inside of a courtroom for simply having the ability to read the Bible on a street corner. Those brothers that went to war, World War I, World War II, they thought they were fighting for the freedom of our people. They thought that they would go to war and that we would have, something better in this society. When I look today and say, damn, I can't even read the Bible inside of Canada on a street corner. I can't do it. I have to monitor the words that come out of my mouth because reading the Bible is so offensive. That is not freedom for a black man. Abortions, the prison systems, the gangs, the drugs, the broken homes, the divorce, the way homes are run today. You can't even be a black man and rule your own household. Black men today are oppressed by their own goddamn women. That's freedom in America in 2026. Don't even have the right to freely worship whatever God you want to worship inside of your house. That's the world that we live in today. Let me share my screen on this verse. Baruch chapter 3 and 4 says, O Lord Almighty, thou God of Israel, hear now the prayers of the dead Israelites and of their children, which have sinned before thee, and not hearkened to the voice of their God, for the which caused these plagues cleave unto us. You want to know why blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous are in the condition we're in today? Because of our disobedience to the Most High God. These plagues of the Bible, these curses in the Bible, they cleave to blacks, Hispanics, and indigenous. That's why we're so destroyed as a people today. And the brothers that went to war, the fallen Israelites, the black, Hispanic, and indigenous man who went to war and is now in their grave, their prayers would be that my people turn back to the laws, statutes, and commandments of God. What did Martin Luther King say, before he was assassinated? He said, I led my people into a burning bush, or I led my people into a burning house. That's what Martin Luther King said. Martin Luther King today would not be telling black people to integrate. Martin Luther King today would be saying, I recognize that, this dream I had failed my people. That's what Martin Luther King would say today. You can look up the quotes. It's all over the internet. It's all over the history books and his biographies and bibliographies. Before Martin Luther King died, this was not the vision he had for his people. Again, we have the ability today to look back on history and say, did we get it right or did we get it wrong? We can all look back at Martin Luther King and say, damn, at the end of his life, he recognized that he got it wrong, that we should not integrate, that there's something out there better for us. What we have today, this is not it. It's very sad, you brothers and sisters who, are complacent or get high every day so that you don't have to feel the pain or live in the reality of what we're going through today is a very sad thing. And you need to keep your opinions to yourself. You need to move out of the way for a group of men who are willing to fight for something different. That's what we do in the ISUPK. We are fighting for something different. Fighting for the black household to stay together. Fighting for black, Hispanic, and indigenous love. Fighting for a child to have a right to have a father in their life. Fighting for the right to have a mother in their life. Fighting for the right for a child to see his parents hold hands and have a, stable, loving relationship, where we don't have to fill the prison systems, where we don't have to abort our babies, where we don't have to die of, high blood pressure and all these different diseases that we're dying of every day. Memorial Day is not a day that we should, wake up and celebrate and say, we got it right. Memorial Day is not a day where we should celebrate and commemorate the successes of America, the successes of Canada. We can't do that knowing how destroyed we are as a people. Let me close that. You look up, and this is something I challenge, Blacks, Hispanics, and Indigenous to do. You start to look up statistically who is the number one race of people dying of AIDS and HIV, the number one people incarcerated, the number one people being raised in single or fatherless homes, the number one people incarcerated, the number one children being aborted, the number one on every goddamn list that plagues this earth. It is Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous. Over and over and over again. I challenge you to look these statistics up so that you can truly wake up to the destruction of our community. That brother on Memorial Day getting up there at a pulpit saying we have hope in America. That is a very sad and silly dream to have. That last verse, again, I'll repeat, it says, the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God. We need to stop being foolish and hope in this world's wisdom. Hope in Memorial Day. Hope in joining the military. Hope in becoming a police officer. Hope in joining some social service group so that our condition as a people can be better. It doesn't work. The ISUPK, we do something different. Let's try as a people for once to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments of God. And let's see where that gets us. Let's see how far being people of integrity gets us, which is what we teach in the ISUPK. So with that, we got Black Watch live right now. Tune into Black Watch, Commanding General Yohana and the Heavy Hitters. They're live right now. Jump over to Black Watch. All right. And with that, we're going to end Monday Night History class. All right. Shalom, Israel.
Hey, listen, brothers and sisters, man. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to isupk.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need to do.
They're one West. They're one West. They're one West. They're